Hi there, welcome to my movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. Well, we're into September now, so we got a few new films to cover here as we're just getting close to the edge of award season here. So we're going to have a lot more films coming later this year, but first we've got a few films that we had to cover from August, as well as a few new films coming out this month. Of course, the big film coming out this weekend is Haunting in Venice, the new Hercule Poirot film, directed by and starring Kenneth Branagh. This is his third film. We'll also be reviewing Gran Turismo, based on the video game, based on a true story as well. I'll get into that in a little bit. I'll also be covering a smaller film called Miguel Wants to Fight, which is currently on Hulu right now, a coming-of-age drama comedy of sorts. And we'll also be covering the low-budget, high-concept sci-fi film Aporia, which has just recently come out on Blu-ray and DVD this week. So, without further ado, we will get to the first... Ooh, I was just going to grab some water, and I spilled it a little. Okay, so we are going to get to the latest movie reviews this week. But if you like early reviews, and especially since A Haunting in Venice is just opening this week, it'll be opening up tomorrow. So if you like early reviews like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and let me know what you think. So let's get rid of some of the credits here. There we are. All right. Okay, now get up my notes here, and we will talk about Kenneth Branagh's latest film of Hercule Poirot. Let me see if I got all my notes here. Yep. Okay. And here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, A Haunting in Venice is the third Hercule Poirot film from Kenneth Branagh, his previous two films being Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. And I gotta admit, I think Branagh's films get a little bit better with each entry. I really didn't like his version of Murder on the Orient Express. I felt it was very, stuffy, and even, his shot choices just did nothing for me in that film. And Death on the Nile had a little bit of better cinematography, but also a lot of acting that fell flat. Half the cast felt pretty good, and the other half didn't really work here, even though I think Branagh worked a little better in that film. And then we come to A Haunting in Venice, which is loosely based on the Poirot story of Halloween Party, and by loosely I mean it mostly just takes place on Halloween. And this is something that I actually like about this film, because this is a film that gets a little bit more inventive. It tries to find something new to do with the character. It tries to present a different sort of mystery. So it's just not the same thing. So I love, for example, I love the fact that, you have the setting in Venice, so it provides the perfect, scary atmosphere where, there's raging waters outside, there's a big storm coming, there's no way to get out because, everyone maneuvers around canals there for transportation, so it's got a great setting, and I think that Branagh actually kind of uses it well to stage this film more like a horror film. And he leans so heavily into that, where honestly, if you were to tell me that this was by a different director, Branagh just handed it off to someone who knows how to make, spooky mystery films, I would believe you, because it's night and day between, his previous two films and this one of A Haunting in Venice. So for this story, it takes place in 1947 in Venice. Poirot is retired and trying to keep out of mysteries, but then, of course, he gets pulled right back in, because that's the nature of his work. So he gets pulled back in by Ariadne Oliver, played by Tina Fey, who is a novelist who wants to see if she can stump Poirot at this Halloween party where there will be a seance. The seance is being called because they believe that there's a curse on this particular residence, in which 1 year ago, I believe, I'm pretty sure it's 1 year ago, a daughter committed suicide there, but they believe that it was part of the curse because of a marking on her that they believe was left behind from a kind of sanitarium that was at this residence previously. So So of course, like Poirot attends and he thinks like this is going to be an easy slam dunk. I'm dealing with a medium who thinks that she can talk to ghosts. Expertly played by Michelle Yeoh. For the brief screen time, she makes this character work with kind of like having like this sternness, but also kind of trying to like lean into like the sincerity of what she's trying to do here. And of course, like, Poirot kind of figures it out instantly once the seance is on. But then a murder follows, and then, of course, Poirot has to unravel everything from there, except he starts seeing trippy visions and starts doubting his own belief in the paranormal and the supernatural while trying to find reasons for everything. And, of course, because it's Poirot, once again played by Kenneth Branagh, he will, of course, figure everything out in the end, but it's those little moments of doubt in between that really make the character more interesting. Because, I mean, like, even though, like, this is kind of like a retooling of Halloween Party, he's going to solve it by the end, and that there is going to be a reason within the realm outside of the paranormal for everything that's happening and everything that he's seeing. So I doubt that's, like, a big spoiler here. Now, what really works about this film, first off, like I mentioned the setting, I love the way that this whole like large Venice residence is shot, like where it looks like a little bit decayed. There's darkness lurking behind walls. There's like literal skeletons in their closet there. I love the way that it's shot. It gets pretty clever here with like some of the shots here. Like there's a few Dutch angles. There's the tilting of the camera. There's like, the inverting of, turning the camera like upside down as it follows a character across the room. And then just like beautiful shots of just like, from like the ground level of when like a character is trying to make a call or when a character is being drowned. Just the way that it's all set up. It's wonderful to look at. I will say this though, like with Branagh's direction, I think like at least for the first act, he leans a little bit too heavily into the jump scares. Now, I don't have a problem with jump scares if there is something that's genuinely scary. And there are a few moments like that where I'm like, okay, fine, that works. But then there are other like kind of like more cheap jump scares where something is not as scary. Although it does have a little bit of a cover here with what Poirot is experiencing within this, so it's kind of it's okay. It's mostly just the volume of the jump scares. Like it gets to a certain point where I think like maybe half an hour in, and you get to like maybe like the 6th, 7th, or 8th jump scare, and you're kind of like, okay, I get it. It's supposed to be spooky. It's scary. You have enough of that with the atmosphere. I don't think you have to keep going back to this horror bag of tricks here. Like you feel like Branagh's throwing too much out at the screen here, trying to like no, it's gonna be a spooky horror mystery thriller. It's like, yeah, but like you have a great environment and you have good camera shots. You don't need that. You don't need as many jump scares. Like it's scary enough as is. Another questionable thing here is like there's a scene where Poirot unearths some decayed corpses within like a hidden passage within the building, and it's a very terrifying moment, especially with like the water that gushes in to that location, and like the decayed bodies are disgusting, and it's like it's a great scene. It's just the music that they chose here, it feels a little bit too like I'm trying to find the right words here. Like it doesn't really match the tone here. It feels like more of like a TV mystery. Like it's something you might hear on like Murder, She Wrote. And it like there are a few questionable choices like that. But like I said, for the most part, the way that this mystery's set up and the way that it kind of like slowly reveals itself, but not too slow. Like this film's actually, I think it's like about like 100 minutes long. So it's definitely one of like the more trimmer mysteries that Branagh's assembled here. And I think that works to the film's benefit because it proceeds pretty quickly. They dice up like the interviews so that it proceeds at a much more dynamic pacing instead of just, okay, this is my biggest problem with Murder on the Orient Express. It's like, okay, here's this suspect, here's this suspect, here's this suspect, and you don't really get a lot of them crossing paths as much. But in A Haunting in Venice, you actually have a lot of conflicting views, and there's like like I said, very quick editing and pacing here, where there's rarely a moment where you're bored with it. at least for me, like in like the first act, when they're kind of like setting up a little bit of the lore with this place and staging a children's Halloween party just before the seance, it does drag a little bit, but it does a good job introducing most of the characters here. And the cast actually works really well here. There's very few areas where I say like, oh, these characters aren't working here. And I think, to the film's credit, I think it has more to do with the fact that you don't have a lot of like bigger name A-listers here. Like I don't want to like try to like diminish the value of the actors here, but the actors they have assembled here are clearly not actors who are just kind of like going to show up, you know, deliver their lines kind of like with like a half thought just because like they think they have natural talent here. Everyone's actually really trying here. Like Kyle Allen as Maxime has a lot of like grit to him, where like, you know, he's very like, you know, trying to like contain his like emotions, but is finding it really hard in this very, you know, engaging situation. Camille Cotton as Olga in this also has like a better like containment of like her fear. Like she's terrified, sure, but you can tell like she's holding way more back than what's showcased on the screen there. Jamie Dornan, I was actually really surprised as Dr. Leslie, who plays this doctor with PTSD who you would think would be valuable in a murder case, but turns out to be, you know, like far too like emotional and, you know, like struggling to deal with himself in this scenario, where it's kind of fascinating to watch him crumble in this. And at the same time, you have like Tina Fey, who's not really mugging it up as much as Oliver here. She does a great job too, also like, you know, being more bound by, you know, struggling to not showcase like how bound she is to get like a good story and prove that Poirot is wrong. So yeah, just the casting all around really good. Although like special credit, I do want to bring up Jude Hill as I believe his name was like Leopold. I'm pretty sure it was Jude Hill. The young actor here, who is the son of Dr. Leslie. And the son is probably like the most mature person in this entire murder mystery. Mostly just because, like, you know, he's not as emotionally scarred. Like, he's holding back a lot of his fear. He's trying to like maintain order within the room. Like, basically, like, pretty bluntly, like, you can tell that Leopold is the one taking care of his dad here. Like, his dad is struggling to keep it together. Most of the characters here are struggling just to not, you know, cut each other's throats out with how emotionally charged this investigation is, that it almost feels like, you know, Leopold should just study under like Poirot at some point with just how contained he is. Although like I do like the fact that Oliver and Poirot do actually admit like this kid's a little bizarre, right? It's a little odd that this like dapper 12-year-old is actually has like great vocabulary and is like slamming Dickens as like his preferred choice of reading. So very astute kid, but like I said, he's not too much overstepping his bounds here. It's not like he's a straight man and all like the silliness or craziness going on here. It does actually feel like this is a more like intellectual kid trying to find a reason for everything that went down that night. So like a lot more of this works than I thought it would. Like I said, the casting all works here. There's very little I have to say. Like the other additions of like Ali Khan, Emma Laird, and Kelly Riley all do pretty good jobs. There wasn't like a moment where I was staring at the screen like, oh, okay, this role isn't quite working here. And I think to the credit of the film, it's just like the tighter script here. It doesn't allow a lot of like fat to linger, where it feels like we're just kind of like wasting time here. There's urgency, there's danger to it. There's high stakes to what is going down at this residence that it never bored me for a moment. So, it's like I'm building it up a lot, but I don't want it to make it seem like, it's like a perfect film. Like I said, it has a lot of issues with too many jump scares, questionable music choices. And for as much as I like the Dutch angles, there are a few times it's like, okay, yep, this is good. but you got to switch it up a little bit. And thankfully, as the film goes more along, Branagh actually does switch it up a bit. Although I do got to admit, Branagh is coming a little bit more into his own as Poirot here. Like, he's not, it never feels like he's too stiff in this role, or he's trying too hard for like a laugh or anything like that. He has much more of like an ease to him. Like, he's fitting better into this particular role of Poirot that he's setting up. Not in terms of like what other actors have done to it. Like, obviously there's many better Poirot iterations than this, but if you were to just look at the trilogy that Branagh has set up here, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and Haunting in Venice, Haunting in Venice is easily the best of the three. And on that level, it's actually a pretty decent mystery, considering how much more playful that Branagh gets with this material, where it doesn't just feel like he's trying to stick too close to the text and make it all like more like a stiff and stuffy play here. There's actually some creativity and invention here, and that makes A Haunting in Venice a pretty solid murder mystery. So, A Haunting in Venice is currently playing in theaters this weekend. Okay, now we will get to the next film here. Just need to change up the notes here. And we will get to one that we were covering last week. Well, that I was going to cover last week. You know how it goes. All right. Let's get to Gran Turismo. And if you'd like to read the the written reviews, I will have a written review of A Haunting in Venice is currently up on movieswithmark.com right now, so you can go read it there. All right, let's talk about Gran Turismo. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, Gran Turismo is a movie based on a video game, but actually a movie also based on a true story. It's weird. Like, if you were to, like, I think, like, they've kind of, like, titled this almost like Gran Turismo based on a true story or something like that. Although the more fitting title would be Gran Turismo based on a true story that was based on a video game. So, this is a bit of an unconventional video game movie in the fact that it is based on the real life race car driver Jan Mardenborough. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who was a Gran Turismo player, but then got the chance of a lifetime when Nissan and Sony decided to have a Gran Turismo Academy where the best players would train to be real race car drivers. And wouldn't you know it, one of the gamers actually turned out to be a successful race car driver in reality. And when you hear that type of story, you immediately think like, oh, this actually kind of makes like a decent sports drama or story like that. And to its credit for this film, it actually kind of works on that level. That being said, it mostly just kind of fulfills a lot of the expected boxes to be ticked with a sports drama that it's one of those films where it's like the assembly is great, but the path that it follows is pretty rigid for what it's setting up here. And I think because for one thing, it's directed by Neil Blomkamp, who I will say this. It is so cool to see Blomkamp kind of go outside of his comfort zone here of science fiction and try something a little bit different here with Gran Turismo. And I think he actually does a pretty good job with the direction here, considering it's just a little bit over 2 hours and it proceeds really quick. It's very, very, very fast paced. Which for a film all about racing, you want that definitely. So playing Jan is Archie Matakoe, I believe. Archie Matakoe, I believe I'm pronouncing that. Jan, he plays Jan, and he's a young person who's not sure what to do with his life, but he wants something to do with racing and cars. You can feel that drive within him, that he's bound for something bigger, but hasn't quite found it yet. It's only once Danny Moore, a marketing executive for Nissan, played by Orlando Bloom, with the perfect like executive slick back hair, like he's got the hair for this type of role, who comes in with a chance of a lifetime. Because it's weird because, like, you can feel, like, how much of, like, a big corporate decision this was that Jan got this chance. Because, I'm sorry to go off on this detour here, but I gotta bring this up. So the film... The film begins with, like, bringing up Sony as one of the major studios backing this film. And they show you all of, like, the Sony video game characters that you might know from, like, the PlayStation games. And then immediately after that, we get a little bit of a montage of the development of the Gran Turismo video game. And you will see this development later in the film as well. And it's this aspect of, like, commercialism that you can't quite shake from a film like this. And it's hard to, because racing is, like, it's driven by sponsors, so that when you look at, like, the race cars, they're decked out, like, you know, like, they just slap on all the bumper stickers they could just to advertise all the products that are represented here. And of course, you better believe that, yeah, like, Nissan and Sony's names are slapped over everything here. So, minor point about the commercialism, but it does permeate the rest of the film here. So, put in charge of training these race car drivers and eventually settling on Jan after going through all these different drivers is Jack Salter, played by David Harbour, who is a world-weary mechanic who used to be a pretty cool race car driver, but has left that life behind him and now is just a little bit bitter about being a mechanic for spoiled brats. So when he gets the chance to train gamers, he's not all that enthused about it. He makes all the predictable, you know, jokes about gamers and, you know, how it doesn't relate to real life. And then, of course, like, he eventually forms a bond with Jan because he realizes that, no, this kid isn't just someone who plays video games. He's actually studied cars. He knows a little bit about them, and he can, you know, sense what's wrong with them when he's maneuvering them around. So Jan's very astute. So I think it's like, oh, maybe this kid can actually win some competitions. Maybe we could eventually take him to Le Mans by the end of this film, which actually happens. So you can immediately sense, like, you know, what's going to happen with this film. There's going to be a bond between, like, you know, the student and the mentor here with Jack and Jan. There's going to be some exciting races. There's going to be a rival on the track for Jan de Best. There's going to be a down moment where he doubts himself and that he can even become a race car driver, and then eventually getting to the big race in which he will finally win in a big triumphant moment. So it goes through all those beats, and it's fine. And the acting is actually really good from both, like, Archie and David Harbour. And fun fact to note, the real Jan actually does some of the stunt driving in this film as well. So little cool stuff like that is in the film. Also, but the other thing that I got to stress here is that because the pacing is so quick, it works on the track. But for adding the human element here, it feels like conversations are cut off too quick before they can expand to something more. Like one of the scenes that I thought would be great is when there's a moment after the first big race, Jan and Jack just kind of, like, sit down and have, like, a nice quiet moment with each other, in which they talk about their preference in music and, you know, their experience with racing and what they hope to get out of the future. Interesting conversations like that would follow, but they're cut off quick by, like, some fans interrupting or getting to the next scene as quickly as possible, because there's always such a rush to cover all the races here, and some of the races just zoom by in like very quick montages. But I will say, like, the way that they're shot, the way that they cut between, like, the innards of the car and the long shots of the track and the close-ups of the drivers, it's edited, like, at a pretty progressive pace, where it never feels like it's overblown and it never feels like it's boring you with these races. So yeah, like, Blomkamp, in terms of, like, directing the race scenes, he's got it down. But in terms of directing the scenes with the characters, I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time with them, especially since like, Jan has, like, a love interest in this film, but there's so little time for her that it feels like Jack literally has to remind him, like, hey, maybe you should bring out your girlfriend, just in case you forget about her in this fast-paced plot, because there's a lot that gets kind of, like, shoved to the side here, especially for the fact that you have Duman Hassoun playing Jan's father here, and to the film's credit, like, this is one of the few films with Dumont where he is not like killed as a supporting character. In fact, there's actually a very touching scene towards the end of the film where he confronts his son and realizes that, oh, I was wrong. I should have had more faith in you. And it's, and it's fairly like typical dialogue for that scene, but Hansu just delivers it in such a powerful and meaningful manner where it's like you really do like kind of feel the emotion in that scene. It's too bad, however, that this is mostly kind of bookended where we don't get to spend enough time with Jan's father, Steve, in this, where you feel like that sadness is warranted, just because like it feels like we're in such a rush. We gotta tick all the boxes here. We gotta get to this race. We gotta get to this character beat. We gotta get to this plot point fast. And like I said, for the racing, it works great. The races are exciting. They're engaging. They're beautifully shot. They're wonderful. They're fun. But then it's hard to feel that extra bit of emotion and feel a little bit more for Jan beyond just surviving the race when we don't get to spend as much time with these characters. That like a lot of his quirks, like the fact that he's got to listen to Kenny G before getting into a race, is just like a quick like comedic punchline. Just like boom, that's it. It's like I listened to it and I'm able to race better, and that's like the joke. Like anytime he wants to relax, they switch on Kenny G. But yeah, I mean, sure, for people who want to measure this on the level like of a video game film, yes, this is higher up there. It's I enjoy it a lot more than a lot of other video game films, but like looking at it more as like a true life sports drama, it's just kind of going through the motions. It's well assembled, and like, yeah, it's on a rigid track, but it speeds so well through it that I kind of really admire the film, just based on the way that it's assembled, from the way that it sets up races to what's shot, to the way the cars look, to the way they crash on the track, and just building up the intensity of those scenes. I love it on that level. I just wish that I could love it more on the human level. So on the, in terms of like a racing sports drama, this film just kind of, it's a good film. It's a good but not great film, mostly because I wish that we could spend more time with these characters so that the races had a little bit more at stake than just, careers and the life of the driver, like the standard stuff that's on the line in racing dramas. So, I mean, yeah, like it's no Ford v Ferrari, but hey, for the way it's shot, this is a pretty good film as a sports drama. And as a video game film, yeah, this is top of the tier. I would watch this so much. I would be much more willing to recommend this over a plethora of video game films, bar none. So yeah, pretty good sports drama and very good video game film for whatever that review might be worth. So Gran Turismo, I think, should be in theaters for a little bit. We'll see how it does. And then we'll get to a few quickie reviews here. I say quickie just because like there isn't too much to say on these films. Oh, one moment, I gotta clear my throat here. Okay, and we're back. All right. Whew. Let's get to Miguel Wants to Fight. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Miguel Wants to Fight is an offbeat high school comedy that's all about fighting. So, like, I want to say this, though. I love that the film is kind of relating a little bit more to teenagers, for those who are really big into anime. It's very fascinating to me that like that anime has become such like a mainstream thing. Like now that it's very common to see teenagers obsessing over it and to have films where teenagers are obsessing over it. So basically, the film is about Miguel, who's a teenager who's never been in a fight, which is concerning for his friends group because everyone else in his group have been in fights. In fact, they've even been in group fights in which they were all expected to fight for each other and kind of like defend like their honor whenever a bully comes up to them or whenever somebody wants to start something. And Miguel has never gotten that chance. Like, for the few times when he's been tasked with fighting, he's kind of hung back. He's kind of pretended to fight, try to find his way to get out of those situations. And he feels like he's kind of missing out on something, especially when he realizes that he's going to be moving soon and is going to be losing his entire friends group. So feeling that he's going to miss out on like a tradition within his collective, he wants to try to find a way to get into a fight that will be special. So it's like kind of like those like romantic comedies where it's like, I want my first kiss to be special. It's the same deal here. Like, so because his friends realize that Miguel, who's played by Tyler Dean Flores, who actually does a pretty good job in this film, he's never been in a fight, so they decide, oh, well, we got to make it perfect. We got to plan it out. We got to find you the right target. We got to make sure that you're fighting for a reason and not just being a bully. And basically all those plans go awry. And Miguel sort of knows this because he starts fantasizing about how the fight will go down, in which, you know, he's a big fan of like One Punch Man and stuff like, you know, like the Matrix and like Enter the Dragon. In fact, his Enter the Dragon like fantasy in his head is pretty spot on until reality starts creeping in and he realizes, oh, I don't actually know that many fighting techniques, and I would kind of, even in my own fantasy, I would kind of get my ass kicked. So so yeah, there's this kind of fear that permeates it. He even has some like nightmare dreams that have him fighting and still losing. So there's this constant fear that like he's not going to be able to live up to what he's putting out there. And of course, like, stuff actually does go awry. Like he picks on the wrong targets. Like especially like there are some innocent people that get caught in the crossfire. Like a teacher gets accidentally punched in her boob during one of Miguel's attempts at a fight. He ends up in detention, which is like the most like reactive teacher who's just bitter about her job. You have him like lobbing insults at people he really didn't mean to, and just feeling like he's inadequate throughout it. Now, on one level, I was fully expecting not to like this film because I thought I was just going to be Miguel going down this path of just being a bully and just like, you know, stressing too much how you have to get into a fight in order to enhance some level of machismo. But thankfully, the film is not that. The film is more or less about feeling that you're being left out of something bigger. Because like the ultimate resolve is not like, you know, that Miguel finally gets in a fight and he's triumphant and wins. Like when he finally does get to the fight, I love how like they don't telegraph it as much. Like they build it up like it's like this big showdown that's gonna come out. Like they have like these kind of like this kind of like framing of it as like a big boxing match coming up. And ultimately the film just ends up being a little bit of a scuffle, and then Miguel gets back together with his friends after having a big down moment and fearing that he's going to lose touch with them. And ultimately, the film is actually about friendship in this regard, and on that level, it actually does it pretty well. And the one other thing I want to mention, too, is that there's a great fantasy sequence here where Miguel imagines himself being within the role of One Punch Man. And they actually do animate it in a pretty competent anime style here. Like, I was almost kind of wondering, because this is a little bit of a lower budget film, I was almost kind of wondering, are they going to have like a little bit of anime here? Or are they going to, because if they have the budget, and there it is, there's the One Punch Man parody. And so yeah, it's very much like kids geeking out over anime and stressing about trying to assert themselves, and pokes fun at kind of this irrational fear to have at that age, but realizing that, you know, ultimately your friends will save you in the end. So yeah, in terms of being like, if you're expecting it to just be like adhere to like a fighting anime style, you're probably not gonna get a lot of that here. Like, it leans into some of like the tropes but doesn't fulfill them, so it's kind of a little bit more of like a satire. But on the level of like a kind of coming of age high school drama comedy, mostly on the comedic side, this was actually a pretty offbeat film that is actually pretty pretty sweet at times. For as aggressive as it tries to get, especially with Miguel's father, who is just absolutely cruel in this film, who kind of like insists that Miguel end up being a bad guy if he's already seen as a bad guy, which is kind of terrible advice, but I like the fact that the film kind of acknowledges it a little bit. So yeah, it's a very, very sweet film about a teenager who wants to punch somebody, which is not something I thought I would say, but there we are, you know. So Miguel Wants to Fight is currently playing on Hulu. All right, so let's get to our final film. Tonight we have Aporia. Okay, let me get up my notes here. All right, get a little drink. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. So Aporia is one of those low-budget sci-fi films that has a pretty amazing idea and has a great execution with it. This is the type of science fiction that I like, but you don't see as often. Ones that have big, grand ideas, but want to try to like whittle it down to make it fit within a smaller budget film. And Aporia actually kind of works on this level of being kind of like a low-tech, high-concept sci-fi. This film actually did it for me. So the premise is that you have Sophie, played by Judy Greer, is a recently widowed single mother. She just lost her husband in a car crash, and the driver is still walking free, and she's just struggling with work. Her daughter is struggling at school, and she's feeling like the one thing that could help me in life right now is if my husband, Mal, played by Eddie Gathicki, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. She believes that if I just had my husband back, everything would be perfect. So one of Mal's friends, a scientist, brings Sophie over to his house and says, "Hey, look, I've made this time machine, but it's not so much a time machine so much as it is a time weapon, in that basically what it ultimately boils down to is that this machine can kill anyone from the past and then affect the rest of the timeline. That's all it does. It doesn't like send you back in time or you interact with yourself. It just sends back this blast that kills somebody and wipes them off the timeline and changes everything." And that's a great idea. And I like the fact that it's kind of assembled with this very like kind of rustic giant motor in someone's garage. And they have like this very like classic like computer UI that sets it up, like super, super low tech stuff here. That's actually pretty endearing. I like it. After a while, I'm like, okay, I'm with it, because like it's clearly that this is more about the ideas of tampering with time more than anything. Because sure enough, Sophie ends up killing the driver and her husband is still alive. And so the scientist is all excited. It's like, oh, it works, cool. But then comes the more interesting question, which is, what do we do after that? Like, we have this machine that can kill anyone from the past. What do we do? And it's not such like an easy thing. It's like, oh, we'll just go back and kill this person. Or, you know, we could just, you know, hey, we could go back and kill Hitler and see what happens. Because the thing is, like, between Sophie, the scientist, and her husband, they all combined together to pose the very like disheartening question of like, you know, is it right to wipe something off the timeline if we end up changing something else in the timeline? It's one of those things where it's like, you know, you always watch these time travel films where they try to like change the past and in essence change their future, and they didn't expect it and they got to go back and undo the damage. These are clearly people who have seen a time travel film, as they do consider who they should choose to take out next. Because soon after this, you know, like they have this questioning, Sophie ends up connecting with the widow of the driver who killed her husband. So feeling a little bit guilty, she decides like, oh, well, maybe I'll try to make her life better. And then Sophie realizes that, oh, well, this woman has a daughter and now she's a single mother, so I could relate. But her daughter is also having medical problems, and she could really use the extra help with the medical bills. And so Sophie poses this question, like, well, if I did this, maybe I should help out their life as well. And then, of course, as you would expect from this scenario, everything snowballs a bit here. Like, some rash choices are made about who to kill. Not everybody is on the same page with how they want to change the timeline. Stuff gets changed around in their own timeline that they don't want to be affected, that deeply changes their life for the worse. That ultimately, it gets to a point where they kind of got to just undo the damage of the time machine altogether, and just whatever happens with the timeline, that's what you get, and you're going to have to deal with it. And it's delivered in a very, like, touching manner. Like, I love the fact that, like Judy Greer doesn't phone in her performance here. She's very, very much engaged with, like, the deep existential dread that comes with, realizing you might not have your husband forever, even if you're able to traverse time to prevent that death. Like, it feels like something else is going to foul it up at some point. So, and the other thing too is, like, just the deep ethical and philosophical questioning of, like, just deciding who you want to take out, and the implications of that to, how you affect the rest of life, with, like, a bit of, like, the butterfly effect, is actually pretty intelligent for this script. Like, it's not like it's not like really deep where, like, the characters are, like, like quoting back different philosophers and, like, drawing up, like, massive charts. Like, it's more like just like a sit down. It's like, let's think this over for just, like, a little bit. And they do actually bring, like, more emotion into the equation. So it's not just a bunch of characters just standing around saying, well, if we change this might happen. It's like, like one of those, like, dry and stuffy 1950s science fiction films. This film actually, it knows where its heart is, and that it's, it's about loss and dealing with that loss, and trying to realize that constantly reworking the timeline is not going to be the answer to that. Sometimes you just have to endure, the cards that you're dealt, and, like, and sometimes, it can have unintended consequences to have that much power over a timeline. I didn't want to bring it up, but it's kind of like the same deal as The Flash. It's pretty much the same deal as, like, the Flash film, except no wonky CGI because it's low budget, and a better moral questioning beyond just the emotion. Like, don't get me wrong, it's very much a part of, like, Sophie's arc that, she rashly decides, like, I want my husband back. Like, she's even given that moment in the film to make the rash decision. And it works because you feel for her throughout the film. It doesn't just feel like she's passively going through this grand discovery of a time machine gun, basically. And it makes that premise work. Like, everyone's taking this serious enough. No one's winking at the camera. And it is a film where it actually kind of got to me. Like, when you get to that final shot, not the penultimate final shot, I should say, between Sophie and Maul, and they're at this moment where they're expecting, like, the timeline to completely change, and the way that it just hard cuts to this kind of, like, memento mori of them is just it's so perfect. Like, there's nothing I would change about that scene. The way that it's shot, the way that it slowly builds up the tension with an unexpected nature, where there's no, like, soundtrack or sound effect cue. Like, it hits you like a ton of bricks when you're not ready for it. It works so well. So yeah, if you're looking for a smaller independent film that's science fiction, that actually has more than just, like, a bunch of special effects to it, like, it actually has better ideas, yeah, Aporia is exactly the type of film that you've been looking for, and one that I was greatly surprised to have found. So Aporia is currently on DVD from I believe from, like, Well Go Entertainment. Very, very, very small film. So go check it out. So there we go. Whole bunch of recommendations for this week. So let's get a quick recap of the films that we reviewed on today's program here. Play a little outro music here. So, I should take off the credit. I prematurely put up the credits here. So, we reviewed A Haunting in Venice, Kenneth Branagh's new Poirot film. It's one of his better films, but it's still, like, a good but not great murder mystery. At least this is a more creative film than Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile. I reviewed Gran Turismo, based on the video game, based on the true story of a gamer turned race car driver. As a video game film, it's actually really good. It's very entertaining. The racing scenes are fast and exciting. But as a sports drama, it kind of just ticks all the expected boxes, where the film is more interesting to look at than it is to get engaged with its characters, mostly because the film won't let us get engaged with the characters all that much. I also reviewed Miguel Wants to Fight, which is a coming-of-age teenage film all about one kid trying to get into a fight. I thought it would just be, just like a standard, kind of similar to Gran Turismo, like a sports drama building up to the big fight. But thankfully, it's a film more about just, finding friendships and being open and honest with each other, which is very surprising. A little bit. Also, it has a great One Punch Man parody in it, so check it out just for that. I also reviewed Aporia, a high-concept, low-budget science fiction film about altering the past that has fine performances and a great use of a great idea within a highly emotional science fiction film. So there's all the reviews for this week. Yeah, you can read my reviews over at movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. So we're going to be coming up to award season here, and there's going to be a lot going on, so we'll be covering more movies in the coming weeks coming up here. So towards the end of September, I will hop back on where we will have a lot of films to review, including The Creator, the new film from Gareth Edwards. We'll also review Saw 10, the 10th entry in the horror saga of Jigsaw. And maybe, just maybe, I'll see if this will happen. Pretty sure it will, but I'll see if we can review the most anticipated film of the year, Paw Patrol. Mighty movie. A few people are looking forward to do the Saw Paw Patrol thing with like the Barbenheimer stuff like that. What was it? No, wait, it's Paw Patrol. That's the big joke that's going on here. A lot of people are expecting like the Paw Patrol thing, Saw Patrol, will actually increase the sales for both like the Saw film and the Paw Patrol movie, and will actually get people watching. But the thing is, people were already watching these movies. Like the last Saw film, what's called Spiral, came out like 2 years ago, and that did really well. And Paw Patrol's last movie came out 2 years ago, and that also did pretty well. So it's not a big jump to expect that these films will do well. Like they're modestly budget. I'm pretty certain that the budget is going to go over $30 million for these films. So they have a proven track record. They'll do well. They'll do fine. But we'll see how both those films stack up when we get to the next movie review stream, which should be in about 2 weeks here. So check me out on movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. And if you like more early reviews like this, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, where I also do video essays. I've got a few more recorded and written that I'm going to get to eventually, so there's lots more coming. And there'll be plenty of movie reviews, especially coming up in the fall season, where it will be crowded. Especially during like October and November, they're going to slam in a few of them. I know it. There's going to be a lot coming. So, sure to check that all out, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one, everybody.